welcome to my office. This is where I work in this studio. Normally I see you at the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model Applications. And I'm psyched that it's funny. We talked about the checklist for security and governance. That's been your project for the most part that I've seen since I came into the project. I thought that would be something as our community begins talking about AI applications and how to deploy those in the cloud in their data centers and things like that. I thought it'd be really, really impactful stuff to bring to my community. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of what it is, I'm curious to know, what is it that drove you to want to have this sort of checklist? What motivated you to really get this thing done?
I think it's something that we share in our OWASP group. We're really a lot of architects and developers and practitioners. There's a few people that have deep machine learning and artificial intelligence background, but the majority of us are people who have been trying to protect organizations and develop for organizations for a really long time. And when ChatGPT came out, we all shared that same level of, this is the most amazing thing ever, and this is the most terrifying thing ever. And so when ChatGPT first came out, I actually didn't get super involved with the hype. I mean, we've been through so many hype cycles, and artificial intelligence, I can tell you, I mean, it took about 2 prompts, and I was just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And I thought, this is finally something that we could use to accelerate the maturity and get to the place that we want to get. I mean, it gets rid of so much of that really difficult work that's manual and drudge and not very fun. But then on the other side, what I saw was people really trying to recognize that it was a completely different way to use technology. Even now, I'll go into like a CISO meeting group and they're talking about, oh, well, you just have to set up filters and firewalls. And I'm like, no, that's not all you have to do. And so the motivation for the checklist was to help people really be able to grasp as quickly and as simply as possible the nuances of trying to use this technology. I hear people going, well, we're just blocking it. We're blocking it. I'm like, probably not. I mean, it's just everywhere. There's so many plugins. There's so many different versions. There's so many different ways to use it. And I don't think that's successful. I think that you want to understand it, but you do want to have some level of understanding where it's going. So trying to address those 2 extremes of saying, oh, we're just not going to engage. We're not going to use it. We don't see the benefits. And, oh, we're all in. Be strategic. There is some things you need to think through. So when I was first trying to wrap my head around it, I created the AI mind map that I was like, okay, here's all of the things that you need to think about, even from like a legal perspective. Even though we don't have a law around artificial intelligence currently, a national law, a lot of your privacy laws have direct implications around artificial intelligence and how you use it and how you deploy it. Different rules like in industry where you have to have a human in the loop. You can't necessarily just send people to a chatbot. So helping people, the legal implications of code and warranty and licensing and insurance, like all of the things that before you actually bring this into your environment, there's some nuances to it that you want to think about.
Yeah, the cool thing about the document, having read it, and by the way, for anyone in the community, obviously, that hasn't read it, we'll have a link that'll be there for you. But having read it, it's nice because a lot of the justification for it is really upfront. And it kind of gives you the rationale behind what is this thing? What's it for? Why are we doing this? And then gives you the checklist. I really kind of appreciated that. I expected as I was opening it, I'm just going to have a checklist. But man, it was a whole lot of data and really informative for me even. And I'm typically in this stuff all the time. So I guess the question I have about that is, who do you feel that the checklist is aimed at specifically? Is it really fairly broad, or is this typically for kind of C-level or operations? What do you think?
Yes, C-level for sure. Your head of legal, your CISO, your privacy officer, insurance, your CEO. who is getting pushed from all of his people are saying, hey, we absolutely have to have this in our environment. I tried to keep it simple. I've rewritten it several times. I mean, Steve laughed at me because at one point I had it at 40 pages long. He's like, that's a lot of explanations, Sandy. I was like, yeah, that's probably too simple. The other piece that I tried to include in it is, even though we're all agreeing that large language models and generative AI brings kind of a new type of attack into our environments, a new thing we need to consider, a lot of our old processes and a lot of the old ways that, or the traditional ways that we're looking at our environments are effective. So in there, you'll see a whole list of OWASP tools where people can go and get additional resources, and also MITRE. So I really tried to keep it open source where it was freely available, and people could go out and check out those tools to improve their environments. One interesting thing about the different machine learning people that I talk with is they're really pushing SBOM. They're really pushing CI/CD. So I thought, oh, wow, you could raise the water table across your entire environment by incorporating these best practices for everything.
It's funny you mentioned SBOM. One of the things that I've been paying attention to recently is the OpenSSF, which is a Linux Foundation initiative. And that's one of those things that they talk about quite frequently, is kind of the necessity of SBOM and knowing exactly what's in your environment from a software packages perspective, because that really is one of the really scary threats today. That's like an easy way for a threat to get involved in your enterprise. The number of times we've seen, my son actually, he had to do a cybersecurity thing for school and said, I need to bring in an example of how cybersecurity could be involved in warfare. And I went, okay, SolarWinds. You just need to look at that. And that was really an interesting example of how the software supply chain ended up impacting things. And if they had only known that code stream was infected. Well, the same thing is much, much worse for an open source library. I mean, in a library's project lifecycle, the number of heads that walk through the door is tremendous. And really, you don't know who's really running one of these things. It could be any library gets taken down at any time. So yeah, it's just something that I've been paying attention to. They have an AI working group as well. I ended up putting their working group on my calendar. Not that I could do it before Thanksgiving, like everything's been crazy for me, but I think after Thanksgiving, I'm going to start hitting those meetings pretty regularly as well.
Yeah, I actually about it too, Aubrey. I posted kind of a celebration of some of the work that the Open SSF are doing in the people, the projects that they've assigned. Trying to give more visibility. I'm not sure that people realize how much free, and again, I use that word. We all know that it doesn't mean that it doesn't require work and effort to kind of get it into your environment and start using it. But the tools available around SBOM in improving your environment, they actually have a whole document on how to start using it and scoring your maturity and strategy around using the Cyclone SBOM tool that they have in partnership with Open SSF. So as challenging as it is to do security, we have made amazing progress.
Absolutely. Where do you see the checklist going in the future? I know it's too early to say because we're not actually released yet, right? Like we're still in beta.
And the first version is a 0.05 version. I'm releasing it out into the community to just get feedback, have people say, hey, this was useful, or it would be more helpful if we had more information around this. Initially, I put quite a bit of regulatory information in there. And I actually, because of another working group that we have within OWASP, the AI and privacy group that is focused on that, they're specifically looking at it at a more broad level. And so it made sense to kind of say, hey, let's keep our scope as defensive. So it really is, if you look at the checklist, it's really looking at it more from a defensive, like how do I make sure that this doesn't cause harm being deployed into my environment? And then for the more complicated regulatory and governance piece of it, that will be up in the AI and privacy group. That gives people one place to go find that information.
It's great that you just said it that way, because my next question is, where is that place? Like, where can people go to find something when it happens?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll publish it in our newsletter. We'll post it on our site, our traditional ways of getting out information about our community.